Our nation is more divided than ever before because the liberal, radical, post-national, borderless, and globalist ideology has weakened our nation. Now, desperate for a fourth term, Liberals have replaced Justin Trudeau with his economic advisor and hand-picked successor, Mark Carney. But a Liberal is a Liberal is a Liberal.
It's easy to be negative about everything when you've never built anything, when you've never had to make a payroll. But negative slogans aren't solutions. Anger isn't action. Division isn't strength. Negativity won't win a trade war.
Battle of the slogans. You heard Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservatives, and Mark Carney, leader of the Liberals. They are throwing shade at each other on day one of the federal election campaign. Let's keep this election conversation going with two lovely ladies. I love both of these women on this program all the time. Justine McIntyre, who is a frequent panelist on the Big Five, is with us. Strategic consultant and former city councillor. Hi, Justine.
Hi, good morning.
And I should point out, you also worked on the Frank Baylis campaign on the Liberal side of things for our listeners there. And of course, Tasha Kheiriddin, writer and commentator at the National Post and on her Substack. She's on the panel with us as we kick off this second hour of the show. Hi, Tasha.
Yes.
Okay, guys, listen, here's what I want to get to. And I want to get to, I think we kind of heard it there, from Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. It's pretty clear that Mark Carney isn't as polished delivering the lines, right? Some would say that's a good thing. He's not a politician. It shows. That's what Canadians want. But we have a 35-day campaign where you got to be a bit of a politician in order to campaign. So, Tasha, I'll start with you. Let's talk about that side of things. How do you think this plays out? Mark Carney, who is not a politician, but he's got to do some politicking, versus Pierre Poilievre, who, is, some would argue that he's a career politician. How do you say this plays out?
Well, it depends what the ballot question is. The ballot question is, who's the best person to deal with Donald Trump and the trade war and tariffs and economics? Do you need a politician for that? Or do you need someone who's run two central banks, two national central banks? That's the argument the Liberals are making. They're saying that, Mark Carney has got that expertise. So if that's what people are comfortable and if that's the ballot question, then that favors him as a choice for, I would say, centrist, center-right, and maybe even center-left voters. On the other hand, if you're tired of what the Liberals did for the past 9 years, if that's your ballot question and that's what Pierre Poilievre wants the question to be, then it doesn't matter who's heading the Liberal Party. It could be, a saint. You're just going to say, no, throw the bums out. Same old, same old. Let's opt for the Conservatives. So it really, to me, is a question. His lack of expertise or the fact that he's not a politician could trip him up, perhaps, in certain situations. He's not used to debates, et cetera. But it's more a question of, who do you want in the chair?
I do think there has to be, though, just a bare minimum, right? Like Mark, there is a bar, and Mark Carney does need to be above a certain bar in order to be convincing, by the way. If you want to sell yourself to Canadians here, because you are an unknown to a lot of people. So, Justine, what do you think the bar is for Mark Carney? And especially here in Quebec as well, there's the French language side of things. What do you think the bar is for Mark Carney to convince people he's slick enough, not the slickest, but slick enough to be Prime Minister?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, certainly when it comes to rhetoric, when it comes to delivery and all of that, we've seen it. We saw it in the leadership debate as well. We saw that Mark Carney doesn't have those instincts yet. He's simply not as polished. So that's something that he's going to have to work on. But I do think that this, to come back to what Tasha said, when it comes to the ballot question, there's really two questions that Canadians are asking. Who's going to be able to defend our country against Donald Trump and all of the threats that are coming at us from Donald Trump? And second of all, I think that people haven't forgotten about the affordability crisis. So that's still an issue for people. So I think both of them are going to be trying to position themselves on that issue. And the question is going to be who can do that most convincingly. And I think, of course, what we're going to see Pierre Poilievre doing and what he has been doing up until now is he wants to hold the Liberals accountable for the record of the past 9 years, of the past decade, what he's been calling the lost Liberal decade. And Mark Carney is going to have to position himself as not being a part of that. He's going to be trying very hard to position himself as somebody who's part of the solution going forward and somebody that you can't tag those past issues on. So it's about really those two things. It's about who can respond most effectively to those ballot questions, but also, is this part of the old liberal brand, or is this part of a new liberal brand? Is this something different going forward? That's what he's going to be trying to demonstrate.
I want to talk just a little bit here off the top about the campaign slogans that have come out.
Yeah.
Liberals, Canada strong,
Mm-hmm.
Conservatives, Canada first for a change, right? Canada first, comma, for a change. Those are the two for the Liberals and the Conservatives. NDP have in it for you. Tasha, what do you think here on the messaging that's being sent out here? If Donald Trump is the cloud above Canada right now, I think it explains a couple of those things here. What's your take?
Yeah, it does. And I personally like Canada Strong better. Canada First, when I first heard it, I understand because it's a quote actually from Wilfrid Laurier, which probably only, I don't know, small percent of Canadians actually know that. It's Canada First, Canada Last, Canada Always. Okay, great. But it's only the Canada First. And that echoes to me a lot of the America First language. And that is the weakness Poilievre has to be careful about, because the Liberals will do everything to tie him to Trump. Stylistically is the easiest way. It's not so much content. There's some of that, but it's mostly style. And if he uses a slogan that echoes the style of the US, well, boom. Yeah. Whereas Canada Strong, we can't argue. Everyone feels strong, elbows up, blah, blah, blah. So I think on the slogans piece, the Liberals come out ahead for now anyway.
It's funny because when I heard the Liberals were going with Canada Strong, I said to myself, the Liberals were using Canada Strong, and I said, the Conservatives should use the exact same thing. They should both use the exact same slogan, because I also feel that Canada Strong is slightly better than Canada First. I said, you know what? We're all feeling the same thing, and that is the knock, right? That's coming from the Liberals, is that the Conservatives are too cozy with Americans and Donald Trump. I wonder, Justine, strategically here, what your advice would be to both campaigns. One is you're Carney and you're trying to avoid being attached to Justin Trudeau. The other is Poilievre. You're trying not to be attached to Trump. What's the electroshock treatment for both of these parties to jettison any links they may have?
It's going to be really, really hard for Pierre Poilievre. And I mean, I think you guys saw what came out today with Danielle Smith granting the interview to Breitbart Media, yes, and saying, you guys need to start giving a break on the tariffs and all the threats against Canada, because what you're really doing is helping the Liberals. Okay, what you want to do is help your friend mini Trump over here, Pierre Poilievre. So that really hurt him. And I think that's going to be a thorn in his side. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be harder to unstick that reputation, because it's something that he actually cultivated going back to the truckers encampment in Ottawa. It's something that he cultivated, was saying, look, we need to be, he sort of like modeled his persona, even, I'm going to say. It's not even just like about the Conservative Party and what they stand for, but it's his actual personal brand that he has modeled on Donald Trump. And I think that the Liberals pointed that out very effectively in the recent video where they had the two of them side by side. I don't know if you guys saw that one. Where basically
the audio, the clips,
parroting the exact same speech that Donald Trump has. So he's going to have to be very careful with that. And unfortunately, I think that he chose his campaign slogan maybe ahead of thinking about the kind of reputation that he was going to want to move away from, position himself away from. So he's stuck now with that Canada First, and the for a change I find kind of irritating, like, honestly, like we've been putting Canada last, really, like, it's not that bad, Pierre, you know what I mean? Like, but he's got this kind of, no, but he has this, it's part of his persona also. And you hear it in his tone, even his vocal tone, the vocal quality. He's got this flat line, kind of grumpy tone to his voice all the time. And you see that in the slogan too. You see Canada First. Okay, that's great. That's positive. But then the further change is like, that's the little downer twist that he's going to add. So I think that's how he's going to do it. Is I don't think he's going to be able to distance himself effectively from Donald Trump. So what he's going to do is he's going to instead go after the Liberals and just sort of double down on the strategy that he's had up until now.
I think he will go after Bill, and that the for a change, I think they tacked it on because they don't want it to seem too Trumpian. And it is, it's kind of clever, that piece of it, because for a change, as in change from the Liberals, it reminds you want to change. And I do disagree with the Liberals have not been big Canada firsters, to be honest. For the last 9 years, there's been a lot of denigration of what Canada is. We've apologized for everything. We're terrible. Even, things like reconciliation, Indigenous reconciliation, all these pieces have been played in a negative light. That's the irony. Carney's like all positivity and rainbows now, but for the last 9 years, we've been hearing what a bad country we are, and we have to make amends. And we've done bad things, yes, but the overall impact of it has been a bit of a Debbie Downer on history in Canada, et cetera. So Poilievre talks about that. The real question is how he frames it, because his base, there's a lot of, actually, 1 in 5 are down with becoming the 51st state, right, of conservative voters. There's a base of his voters who don't have a problem with a lot of the stuff Trump is doing and the attitude. So those people, he doesn't have to worry about unless he becomes too anti-Trump. It's the middle. It's the switcher votes. Those are the people who might be uncomfortable being Trump aligned or Trump adjacent. Those are the ones. I agree with Justine there. It's like that's where he has to worry about that adjacency and how he plays it. He's got the hardest row to hoe. Carney's got a much easier path. It's like, I'm not Trump, none of us are, and I wasn't here for 9 years, so vote me, right?
All right, welcome back to the Elias Macos Show. Continuing here with Justine McIntyre, strategic consultant, worked on the Frank Baylis campaign in the Liberal leadership race. And Tasha Kheiriddin's with us, writer, commentator for the National Post, and of course her wonderful Substack as well. I said ladies before, and I know sometimes we don't like to use ladies. Sometimes we do like to use ladies, but I'm gonna bring it back here because I think it is pertinent. We started off this show at 9 o'clock with our Big Five, and we had Jonathan Kalis and Dimitri Soudis on. So I had two men. Most of my callers that called in were men, except for the lovely Dee. So she brought a female perspective earlier on in the first hour. But I need to throw this at the both of you because the polling does show there is a schism in this country on how women vote and how men vote. Okay? So let me throw this at the both of you here. And I wonder if you're Mark Carney, how do you get more men to get on, sway the polls amongst men? If you're Pierre Poilievre, how do you sway the polls among women? Tackle that here for a second. How do you maybe change the demographics? What do you think the strategies are there, Tasha?
Well, I don't know if you want to. I mean, very bold about it because look at what worked to make a comparison. Because just for strategy purposes, you look at the young men vote in the United States for Donald Trump, mobilizing young men. Who face very similar issues in Canada in the sense of disappearing of manufacturing jobs. Young men have lower educational attainment than young women. They actually make less money. Women make less money when they have kids because they tend to cut back on their work. But men's salaries, if you look at salaries, you've got more women going through university. Young men are not. Like, we're out earning them, as in the younger versions of ourselves. So they're in a different place. And they're looking for different things. And Poilievre is offering that. He's talking about the trades. He's talking about traditionally male-dominated occupations and college-level attainment. These things that speak to their anger at the current economic situation. So is he looking for the middle-class suburban woman's vote? I don't know if he is, to be honest. They're in a different place. So I think this whole focus on women and men is not actually, like, when you break it down, there's subgroups demographically that there's sex is involved, but it's also where you are at in your life and what you want. So I think you have to be careful.
So interesting, Justine. I don't know if you'd agree with Tasha's assessment here on maybe you don't do anything. You just play the cards that you have here at this situation. I should point out one thing I've noticed: Pierre Poilievre, his wife, and his kids are surrounding him at every single moment. Mm-hmm. The photos of the whole family on the train. She's on this stage, or his wife is on the stage introducing him. I think maybe that's a bit of a play there to appeal to women voters. What do you say, Justine, on all that?
Well, I think that's about as far as his play is going to go as well. I don't think he's actually going to change his rhetoric or his message or the policies that he's proposing to try to reach out to a group that's not naturally already interested in what it is that he's saying. So I do think that, he made that play to have his family very present. We've seen some ads come out with his wife as well. So he's trying to show the friendly face, the family side, so that the women who are thinking of voting conservative can feel comfortable doing so, that they're not just voting for a dude to go back to your ladies,
Yeah.
that they're not just voting for a dude who's by himself and talking to other dudes, that they're actually voting for a family guy who's got a wife and kids. And so who has some understanding and probably some conversations at home about like who folds the laundry and stuff like that. But I don't think that he's actually going to change his message. And then on the flip side, I do think that with Mark Carney, we're seeing a drag towards the center. I think that we saw Justin Trudeau very far left and, always talking about the issues that have come to be tagged as woke, but that are gender issues and showing up at all the gay pride day and all of that stuff. And I think Mark Carney is not doing that. He's just not talking about it. So he's talking instead about the economy. He's talking instead about US-Canada relations. He's keeping a really, really straight discourse, straight and focused on, and when I say straight, I mean straight line. I'm not talking about anything in terms of gender, but I'm saying that he's keeping it really focused on core issues that matter to Canadians right now. And a lot of people are just looking for somebody who's going to give them that sense of security, whether it's men or women.
Let me throw one thing at you that I've gleaned from the text line here and what our listeners are saying. I want to talk about spending for a bit, social programs and tax cuts. Not lost on me that yesterday and this morning, continuing this morning, we have lots of promises for tax cuts. Carney lowering the lowest bracket by 1 point. He says it's going to save $400 per person there. And then we've got Pierre Poilievre saying I've got basically a 2.25% total tax cut overall. Going to save a family even more. So there's tax cuts. But our spending is out of control, right? And I know Mark Carney's got the line, and it's a slogan, invest, not spend, or we're going to invest and not spend. I don't know how he puts it exactly. How are the parties going to deal with that? And you know what? And maybe, Tasha, at the end of the day, voters don't even care. Just keep promising we don't care. But how do you tackle that? We know the Canadian books are in a bad state. How do the candidates deal with that?
Well, they're gonna do different things, and Carney is right now using this division between operational spending and capital spending. So he's saying, "Well, I'm going to balance the operational budget, which means that things that keep the lights on, we're gonna balance that. We're not going to spend more than we take in to run things, run programs, run the government." But it means that means he can spend on projects like capital projects like infrastructure and other things. They'll be off book. They're on a different book. So if he creates a national housing construction project or an energy pipeline corridor project where, tons of boots on the ground and people are building things, that would technically be not operational. It's a capital expense, future expense. So it's a tricky way of balancing the books. It takes a long time to explain, as it just did for me. So I don't know how successful he'll be in discussing that.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, a lot of people's eyes will just be like glazing over. If people who think the government's bloated and out of control, then they'll agree with Pierre Poilievre. It's bloated, out of control, got to rein it in, right? Yeah. But if they want investment, then maybe they'll listen to what Carney has to say. It depends where you're at in terms of what you think the government should do.
Justine, wrap us up here.
Yeah, it is complicated to explain, but that's actually how cities work. And I think it's a smart way to manage the budget. But it does take some time to explain. And I do think that there are people that are angry about the fact that the government has been overspending. Those people are there. They're not going to change their mind. They're going to be voting Conservative no matter what. And there's one thing that maybe I will throw in before we wrap up here, and that is that what's happening south of the border is so extreme that I think it actually gives us an opportunity here in Canada to do something that's less extreme, because this notion of the Overton window of shifting what's seen as acceptable is changing right now. So the fact that there is so many dramatic cuts to the government happening in the United States means that maybe here in Canada, we're ready for just some small minor cuts, and it's not going to seem as crazy as it would have seemed a few years ago.
I love a good Overton window reference on the program. Justine McIntyre and Tasha Kheiriddin, be well, and thanks for coming on this morning.